welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to introduce you to the Faber-Castell Watercolour Markers. So what are these? These are pigmented markers. So when I say pigmented, I mean that they've got very good or excellent high light fast qualities, which you don't always see in some marker pens because they're dye based. These are two-ended, so a smaller end and a brush end. And I'm going to show you lots of different ways of working with these. Now, it does recommend using on a cellulose paper. So as with any medium, it is surface dependent on the results you'll get. So a cellulose paper like the one I'm using here, Bockingford, or the SAA practice paper is cellulose. It's obviously got the right surface, the right size on the surface to allow enough absorption, but not too much, and allow the markers to move with water. So they are pigment based and they're also water soluble. Double-ended to give you that option. I've got the set of 10 out, but thinking about it, I could get away with just a few pens because you can mix. So look at that fabulous mixing quality. So I've chosen primaries. I know people will say that's not the red, but to be honest, if you're mixing and and you want a good purple or a good orange, magenta is much more of a colour that you should look for than a colour like this red, because printers use this cyan, magenta and yellow, and it's the same when you're doing a colour mixing. You will find that the magenta colour gives you that beautiful purple and the orange, whereas you may struggle with others. Great, you can see there, just from those three colours, how I can expand the range. So, though I've got the set of 10, which has got colours like the greens and oranges that I don't necessarily need, they're actually handy. So why would you want a pigment marker set? So light fast, so now you can put your pictures on the wall. They don't have to be stuck in a sketchbook. But think about travel. If you're going anywhere and you're worried about taking your paints, you know, if you use wet paint, or you want something that's actually quite light but gives you lots of options so you don't have to take a whole range of paints. These are really handy because you can use them in many ways. You can use them as you would do as a marker. So you've got those marks. So putting pigment on. And I know I'm using a synthetic brush because it's got that slightly stiffer hair, which I like and find I am able to control. And you can see how well this moves. Just moving, blending. So use it as a pen or move it and add extra tones and marks. Should have started with the yellow first. So put yellow on here. Not putting too much on. It's easier to put colour back on than it is to take it away. Okay. Should have put the yellow on first because I find the lighter colours going on first will give me less cross-contamination. This yellow's not as bright as I would have liked, but this is the colour that I get in the set of 10. There are other colours available. but I can make it work. And you can see how it changes when I add the water. So it goes on quite orangey yellow, but when you add the water it seems to get a little bit cooler. And you can see how well also and how much the pigment moves. Just adding a splash of water. What I did find was I tended to add too much water and cause quite a few backruns or blooms, or I don't know what you call them, cabbages we call them. So it's again practice and learn, because this worked really nicely, and that was because I wasn't fiddling and overworking. So I think when I first had them I was over keen, so a lot of water, a lot of trying to move. But you can see here with just a few movements over the pigment, it's moved. And some colours or some pens struggle with that, but it is paper dependent. This is Bockingford rough, actually. I chose a rough surface because I quite like the texture. I want the texture to work with the pen. I just put on some green. And I'm, at the moment, just using them as I would do a pen. I'll get to that scruffy stage. But then you can just keep adding layers. So that green goes on and gives that basic green colour. This is a rainbow lorikeet. Now I don't know where I've got the image from. It's obviously one of mine. And I can't find the images I took when I was in Australia, but they're a parrot, really brightly coloured, which is why when I looked at the set of colours I had, this just stood out. I thought I'd be able to use all those colours on this little bird. And can you imagine these as your garden bird? These are just wonderful little characters. And they're very smart little birds. The male and the female look very similar. You won't really know the difference until you see them as a pair. And then they act differently. You'll know which one's the male and the female. But on the whole, they're pretty similar. So what I'm doing is I'm putting pigment onto my China palette.
Your squeaky China palette.
It's fun, isn't it? I'm going to be doing a lot of that squeaking, sorry. Well, I'm not actually that sorry. And what you can do, you can use it like you would do a watercolour. So you can add the colour from the palette. Again, you're not left with a lot of leftover paint. If it dries, you can rework it. It's just really quite easy. You probably won't take a China palette if you're travelling, but I think it would work on a plastic or a shiny sleeve or anything that you've got at hand. I've just realised I'm not even looking at the image. What I was going to show you while I'm letting that dry, because it does say you can drop the into wet in wet, but I don't like that idea. I don't like the idea of getting the nibs wet as such. So I prefer to put it onto a palette, then I know I'm not going to contaminate. And I was looking at the whole colour range. I meant to do this at the beginning, I forgot. And all the light fast qualities, you've got many 3s, which are the maximum light fast, a few 2s, which is high, so you're talking 50 to 100 years, and none of them have just a 1 star, which is reasonable. So that's why you choose a pigment marker. Okay. Now, I have done this a few times, and I realised I tended to work in a bit too hard. So I'm being quite gentle with the colours I'm adding. Just looking at, so now I'm going to use this as I would do a marker. just using the tip to bring out some of the detail. These tiny little orange highlights that you can see. And if they're too strong, I can just splash water on it. It's much darker down here. Much more orange, probably a little bit of red. But it's nice to be able to swap between using a brush and a pen, all in just one little bundle. Take the orange down here, put the orange on the beak. And the orange, I did notice, which is why I'm putting a lot of colour on without diluting it, it did dull a little bit when I added water. So I quite like the solid colour. So I'll show you. Unless, to be fair, I could have had a contaminated brush. But I've made sure I've got plenty of clean water so that doesn't happen. So when I wet it, you can see, for me, it dulls a little bit. Doesn't give me that full range. So I'll show you on another piece. So really nice and bright as you go on. But when you add water, so that's the, what's that called, Gary? I did it last, the tone, the load.
I can't remember.
I can't. It's been a week. I mean, the colour, the neat colour, we'll call it that. The neat colour, you can see the difference. And I think adding water does change it. So make sure you do swatches, just so you're aware of how the colour changes when you add water. And can you see that? That's the neat orange. Add in the water, it brings out the yellows, which it will come to me. It'll just come to me in a flash, but I really can't remember what we were calling it or what it is called. So again, I'm going to put some orange on my palette and pick that up a little bit because I'm a bit more comfortable putting it on with a brush. I'm not so neat. I don't have to worry completely about the marks I'm making. I find if I've got a pen in my hand, I overthink things. So I'm taking it down a level. And I'm going to mix on the palette. So some of that green and some of that blue, just to, again, take that down another level. Okay, go, nice, much darker green. So you can see actually, when I got this set of 10, I thought, how am I going to work with just so few colours? I wanted the bigger set, obviously. But when you play with it and have a go, you actually don't need all the colours because of the great ability for mixing. Put the dark under there. Okay, so let's bring out some detail here. And the great thing about doing this with a brush is it makes that mark for you. See how you can make that lovely feathery mark for you. And I'll show you with the pen how you can also make the mark using the brush tip. Right, so under here, the wing kind of goes round. And I've just created that by adding a bit of the blue, one of the darker blues, and the green, just to give me a darker green than the initial colour. So it has lovely little... If I just suggest some feathers, I don't have to go into the full feather range. Let me try this. I can use that just to add that bit of detail, bit of shading, a few feathers. There's some dark ones here and some darker tail feathers as they go loop round. Just looking at the wing, it actually has still some quite small feathers. All I'm doing is looking at what I can put in with this darker pen. Coming down here, it's actually quite dark under here. I know I can use the water to soften and blend. So the lorikeet, it's in America, oh no, I mean Australia, and like I say, I have seen them when I was over there, and they're just really funny little garden birds. They're highly intelligent, and their diet is that they eat pretty much anything, but they have a kind of a brush on their tongue, which helps them. So, sorry, I'm stuttering and I'm concentrating. You know, when you get carried away and trying to think about what you're doing, I forget to talk. So, yes, they've got brush like hairs on their tongue, and that helps them to pick up nectar from the flowers, and they get it all over them, and it means that they can help pollinate that plant. But they pair for life, so they will, they're 20 to 30 years that they live in the wild. They're with that same partner. And they live in, I can't remember what it was called, what they're called. Flocks. It's a flock of birds. So a flock. And they roost at night, very much like the starlings over here. And I think mostly starlings and rooks and crows. You get them all at dawn, chattering away, or flocking to their communal areas. They, like other parrots, so it is a parrot. It's called a lorikeet, but it is actually a parrot in its own right. It's from that group. Just darkening off. That tail didn't fit the body. And they like to nest in holes, just like other parrots. So any hollow. And you can see how that's really brought that texture out. Now, that just needs a bit of movement. I don't know if I might cause a bloom here, but my brush was quite dry, so I shouldn't have done. Just using some of that orange I put on here, just, I don't think that's the right colour, but it doesn't matter. I'm just showing some difference. I'm going to put some brown in the eye, and you'll see I've only put a tiny amount because I wanted to show that really lovely brown colour. If I put, it's easier to put little than it is to put too much. Right, if I put them back in the box, I won't lose them. So I want a slightly more orange brown. So use orange and brown. and black. It might bleed. Because normally you can leave and let things dry and move on. So what I might do is put a little colour, very, very tiny bit of colour on the feet. Again, I don't like... Apparently, the feet can vary from this grey, which I can see on my original image, to even pink. What I'll do now is I'm going to let it dry, then I can go back in with the pen and start to bring up a bit detail. So join me in a minute while I'm letting this dry.
Hi, I'm Ali Hargreaves and I'm here to introduce you to Ready Steady Paint. This is a monthly art subscription box for 6 to 11-year-olds. Ready Steady Paint has been designed by today's artists to support, develop and encourage those of tomorrow. I have had over 20 years experience as a primary school teacher. I've worked as an artist in residence in a number of primary schools and I'm also a mum. I've seen how creative subjects, especially art, has declined over the years and has been taught less and less in the educational system. We feel very passionate about filling in this artistic void. We're so excited to share the experience with you and your children. We hope to give children a chance to produce beautiful pieces of art with high quality materials. Following a hand-curated syllabus, each month subscribed children will receive a box full of high-quality artistic goodies in the post. Using these materials, they'll be able to follow the online tutorials delivered by me and accessed through the Ready Steady Paint website. All this will be conveniently delivered to your door at an affordable cost. There is so much to learn and so many wonderful activities to complete and rewards to gain. So what are you waiting for? Join us on this journey of artistic fun and discovery.
And we're back.
Hello and welcome back. So in that time I've had a chance to actually look. This has bled in, but I like it, it's absolutely fine. What it does allow me to do is think about a little bit of detail now, and I'm going to use the pen for this. So just bring out the brown on the banana. And I'm going to add more water onto areas of that, but maybe not all. Leave some of the marks. So you can see how you can actually keep blending, keep moving quite a lot. So a good quality paper helps you to be able to keep layering. A slightly, the wrong paper, it will bubble and not allow you to keep going over and all those layers. So test on lots of different papers you've got. You may find the paper that you weren't expecting it to work really well on is the paper that it works best on. So keeping some of those marks, but also working like I would do if I was working with a watercolour. It depends what you're most comfortable with. I am quite comfortable with a brush. I like bringing out moving the it's difficult because I'm trying to say paint, but it isn't paint. Moving the pigment over the surface and just seeing what happens rather than the very controlled action you have with a pen. And I will finish with a pen. I will add some more detail. Right, under here is actually quite dark. So I'm starting to think about what areas are dark. So I'm pushing that leg back. And under here, the belly comes round, so this is again dark, which means the foot here is darker. I need to take that down another layer. So this foot, I'm not sure, I didn't look at the anatomy of the foot, but it looks like, from what I can see, is 2 toes forward and 1 toe back. Just darkening. Yeah, I've lost that a little bit, but I'm not worried because what I'm going to do to try some red, but I'm not sure how bright that is. So before I surprise and realise it's too bright, I'm just going to put it on the palette and work that way. Right, so I need some shadow under here. I don't want to lose that lightness I've got at the top. Okay. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a pen on top just to bring back a little bit of detail. And I'm not going to go round the whole bird. Because these nibs are either way, whichever end, for me they're quite big for that tiny bit of detail. I'm going to use it in conjunction with a pen.
Anita?
Yes.
Got a question from Paolo,
Okay.
who is watching in Portugal. Does this set have a black?
Yes. Yeah. That is the black I was using. So I was using it.
You were darkening your colours.
Yeah, I was using it for darkening colours, and I wasn't going to use it on here. Could use it, but for this and the size of the image I'm doing, I could get away with it, and I can, because you can do it quite gently, but I feel more controlled with one of these pens. So this is why I'm just doing this. But yes, this is the set of 10. There's a set of 30. I think there's 30 colours in all. I just got out a starter set just to see what I could do. And like I say, the colours you've got are not what you're just left with. You can make so many more colours just from that few 10. Like I say, when I started at the beginning, I used 3 colours and then I got 6 colours. And then I can grow that so easily. So, and I know a lot of people go, oh, what colours do I need? Do I need all these? And I often keep saying to people, no, 3 colours, start with there, find out how you're going to use them, what you use them with, and then add to your collection slowly. You don't have to go in and get all the colours. Marketing don't always, marketing say sell everything, but to be honest, you just don't always need to. Find out how it works for you. This is your medium, your tools. So a couple will actually introduce you to it and you'll end up getting the whole set in the end. But it's not overwhelming. I think overwhelming is what people find. The choice of colours, of paper. And don't make it overwhelming. Keep it simple, and then you'll find you'll get what you need. So now I can bring back, like I say, there is a foot or toe, I think, that goes backwards here, but you can't see it. And then this one that's forward, got these little claws. I don't know how it works, but looking at the photo, you've got a toe that faces that way. Not got a huge amount of lorikeet facts, other than they're a parrot. So with this banana, I'm not going to, and when I do put detail on, I don't put a huge amount on, just let the pen skirt across in areas which I feel needs it. And so I'm just going to add that little bit more orange, which when I added the water for the shadow, it tended to disappear. Go back in. So layering, working into. And I think if you look at this, there's something I've missed. Well, I haven't missed. It's these little white feathers on the head. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to put some little marks in here. They're very subtle, but it's just sometimes these little touches that just take it to another level. So just add in a little bit of detail in the neck. It just kind of, sometimes it's very small touches. That's what I'd tell people. It doesn't have to be a big, grand gesture. It can be quite subtle. So I'm going to be using, should be dry, the gel pen, Secura gel pen, because I found it is one of the best for covering watercolour or anything that's been on a watercolour surface. Now you'll find some of these white pens, they're great on a non-porous surface, but when it comes to a porous surface like this, they tend to sink in and disappear in the colour. And I found this one is probably one of the best that doesn't disappear. So it stays. I'm just going to put, and you can see it is disappearing slightly, but it's given me enough. It's probably a bit too small. I probably would have liked a little bit bigger. It's given me the detail I'm looking for. Little feathers. It's not too overwhelming, but what I also can see is I don't feel I've got any darkness under the face. So that is waterproof once it's dry. Whether it's fully dry now, I'm not sure, but we'll find out. So the face looks very flat. And I probably should have done this before. I'm going to, okay. I'm not putting any more pigment on, no more water. Just move the pigment I've got on here. So just the face, it goes round here. It dips in here. So I'm just trying to suggest that shadow and shape. Using that darker blue. So you can see how just thinking about shadow, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to strengthen that a little bit. So I'm going to go back in with some white. I need to let that dry. There's probably little details around that I can work on, but there's something that I need to finish. The bird is floating. It's not got anything to give it any structure. So I'm going to put some shadow underneath. And shadow, especially something that really is touching the surface like the banana, will have some of the colour of the object in it. So the banana, it will have a touch of yellow. Like I say, it does say, I'm going to do it, but I'm not overly keen. It does say you can put your brush into the water like that. Oops, I've got green on that one. But I'm not keen because I want my brushes, pens to stay around much longer, so I'd rather not do that. What I will do is wet this again, it's not as wet as I would have liked it, is I'm going to put colour on my palette. So I'm going to make a purple. And just drop it into the wet, so a very wet in wet technique. Purple is a great shadow colour, but remember that you do get some of the colour reflected in the shadow. Now that is good for a first layer, but it's not completely finished, because what I need to do is I need to add another layer of shadow. So the darkest area of shadow will be where the feet and the banana are touching the surface. So just dropping in. And I'm not going to just put it under here, because this is thinking about what light the body's making. I have no light source on here, so it is a little bit, I'm kind of making it up. But I can see you've got all of that, which would be in shadow. Just making sure it's touching. And again here, under the banana, this is the darkest area of shadow. Pink. If it's not dark enough, I'm going to drop a little bit of black in. I know a lot of people don't use a black on a palette, but it is a really handy little colour just to add a little bit of dark when you haven't got anything else. And it doesn't mean I'm putting black on, I'm using it just to darken the colours. There we go, that's better. I have on just darkening off. Let that carry on working. And while I've got some shadow colour, bring it in. I like to make sure that all the colours that I've used kind of reflect each other. So that purple colour I've had in the shadow, I want to just let it go into the bird in some way. For me, it just putting a bit of violet in here. It just helps harmonise as a whole, and even into the banana. Okay, I'm going to finish off with some white highlights. So even though I'd gone over this, they're not actually lost because the colour's quite transparent. That's something I was going to talk about, is the transparency. So I tried these on black paper, and as you would expect, they kind of disappeared. They just sank in. The colour wasn't there, so they're very transparent. And you can see that by the way they've been used on top of each other. Don't want to overdo it, but I want to bring some again. It's not isolated, so I'll bring some of the white into the bird. It doesn't have to be much, it's just a touch. And again, I don't know if you'll be able to see it. Might bring a little bit of detail into the feet. So you get to that really messy stage, and then you get to this really nice stage where everything is suddenly falling together, and little touches are making all the difference in how it looks. And you can keep going. So it's knowing when to stop. If I just add little detail like the texture on the feet. And that isn't dark enough as a shadow. And I can only tell that now it's dried. Okay. The same over under the banana. Just wasn't dark enough. Okay, that will do for now. Like I say, I can see areas that I want to work on. So using the new Faber-Castell Watercolour Markers, pigmented, so good light, fast qualities, double-ended, nice. I think they call that the fibre tip and a brush tip. Able to put down really nice, bright colour onto a cellulose paper, they suggest. Use them as you would do a pen, move with water, which is great fun. Also, put them onto a palette, use them with a brush. So lots of opportunities in a really nice mixed colour. That's another thing you can do with them. In a really nice form. So I hope you enjoyed that, and join us later in the week for a live workshop with Amanda Jackson.